Senator Xenophon.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. It is with a great sense of privilege but also great sadness that I rise to speak on this bill today, a bill that I introduced several months ago, and it's the second iteration of a bill to deal with what I believe and many others believe in the community is a very serious issue. And if I can put this to you, Madam Acting Deputy President, imagine this. You're the parent of a 14-year-old girl and she's been chatting online with a 20-year-old young man for months. From the photos online, from what appear to be live feeds, he's good-looking, he's charming, he's funny, and he's a musician. Except everything about this person is a lie. He is, in fact, a 47-year-old paedophile, and up until now, everything he's done is perfectly legal because under current online predator laws, the police need to actually prove the adult must also be grooming the child for a sexual purpose. So under our laws, this online lying to a child doesn't matter, even if the predator attempts to meet that child. But I believe it should matter, and I believe the law should change, and that is why I have introduced this legislation, the Criminal Code Amendment, Misrepresentation of Age to a Minor Bill 2013. And I must say, I wish we didn't need the provisions of this bill, but tragically we do. My South Australian colleagues in particular will be familiar with Carly Ryan's story. In February 2007, 15-year-old Carly Ryan, a beautiful, young, vivacious girl, was brutally assaulted and left to die at Horseshoe Bay in South Australia. When reports of her death were released, the entire state of South Australia and the nation, indeed the nation, were shocked that such a beautiful young woman could be so brutally murdered. We asked each other what kind of monster could do this, and then we found out. Gary Francis Newman was a 47-year-old internet predator, one who had a history of trying to trap young girls online. Police later found he had over 200 fake online identities. To Carly, he represented himself as 20-year-old musician Brandon Kane, and Carly fell in love with this fictitious character. That night at Horseshoe Bay, she thought she was finally going to meet her online boyfriend in the flesh. Instead, a man who had taken advantage of her trust and innocence took her life. When police tracked Newman down 11 days after Carly's murder, he was logged into his computer as Brandon Kane and chatting to another 14-year-old girl in Western Australia. Now, I acknowledge, and it should be said that after a long and traumatic trial for Carly Ryan's family, Brandon Kane is now, Gary Francis Newman is now serving a life sentence for Carly's murder. Now, I acknowledge we already have online grooming laws in Australia, but we do not have anything to directly address the situation where an adult lies about their age to a child online for the purpose of encouraging that child to meet them in person. Because the current laws are too narrow, our enforcement authorities have one hand tied behind their back in the sense that they need to prove that the intention to meet that child is for a sexual purpose. It is for the purpose of grooming. And I think that is simply too narrow, that there ought to be an offence, albeit a lesser offence, but an offence nonetheless that can allow the police to act at an early stage to prevent harm being caused, to deal at an early stage to intervene to prevent that harm. The bill also includes provisions to make it an offence for an adult to misrepresent their age with the intent of committing any other offence. I previously attempted to address this serious issue in 2010 with the earlier version of this bill. I acknowledge the concerns raised in relation to that bill, and effectively what that bill said was that if you lie about your age to a child online, to a minor, then that itself was the offence. I acknowledge that was too broad at the time, even though you wonder why an adult would consciously, deliberately lie about their age in communicating with a child. Unfortunately, at the time, the then South Australian Police Commissioner, Mal Hyde, said the proposed legislation cast the net too widely. And instead of acknowledging the problem, then Commissioner Hyde submission to a Senate inquiry narrowly focused on, and I quote, unintended consequences of, and he said, humorous, innocent and erroneous transmissions that would, if the legislation were to be passed, be a breach of the law. I think Commissioner Hyde and other law enforcement agencies haven't quite got it. This is about protecting children. This is about understanding, about acknowledging that if an adult lies about their age to a child and wants to meet that child via online communications, that itself should be an offence. That you don't need to prove the sexual grooming aspects of it, which makes the legislation, I think, problematic. It means that there are enormous resources undertaken to catch these predators when we could actually intervene at a much earlier stage. So this bill was introduced this year with the encouragement and support of Sonia Ryan, Carly's mother, and I want to pay tribute to the work that Sonia Ryan has done. Some people, when they go through a terrible experience of losing their child, the worst of all possible experiences, she could have crawled into a hole, crawled into a cave and just forgotten about life, but instead she fought back. She said she wanted to warn others about this. And I've seen the video presentations that she gives to schools, where because children understand that this is a real experience, this is not just some theoretical issue, that those children that listen to Sonia's presentation are absolutely transfixed. They're mesmerised by what she has to say. They understand the whole detail of the danger. They understand what it can mean to be subject to an online predator and what it meant in Carly's case. And for the tremendous work that she is doing on an absolute shoestring. The Carly Ryan Foundation operates from Carly's old bedroom, and I've been there, and it's a fitting memorial and a loving memorial for the life of Carly Ryan. And they get literally dozens and dozens of calls each week, thousands of messages each year from people wanting advice, from parents, from children that don't want to approach their parents because they're scared that there'll be some sanctions against them. And there have been so many cases which have been referred to law enforcement authorities, and there's close cooperation between the Carly Ryan Foundation and those law enforcement authorities. And just a few weeks ago, I was part of a meeting with SAPOL, the South Australian Police, in relation to the work that Sonia is doing on behalf of the Carly Ryan Foundation. And I should say that this year, that in 2013, at the beginning of this year, Sonia Ryan was named South Australian of the Year, and one of the Australian of the Year finalists, of course, for her tremendous work, and it is a richly deserved award. But Sonia Ryan believes that in addition to the advocacy work that they do, to the support they give to parents and children alike, to the work she does amongst schools and the general community, we need to have the law to be changed in order to deal with this serious issue. Now, I note that further concerns have been raised during the committee inquiry into this particular bill, particularly in relation to the ages specified in the bill and the use of absolute liability provisions. The Attorney-General's Department in particular stated their belief that the age provisions, the definition of what constitutes a minor in that bill, in my bill, are not consistent with other Commonwealth criminal law. In the bill as it stands, a minor is considered to be someone under 18. However, as the Department pointed out, the age of consent is usually set at 16 in the Commonwealth criminal law. The Department also stated their concerns about the use of absolute liability provisions in relation to prosecuting an offence under this bill. I've circulated amendments to address these concerns, and that's why, Madam Acting Deputy President, the committee process for dealing with bills is so important, and I acknowledge that. If a bill does have technical flaws or issues that need to be addressed from a public policy point of view, then the committee stage is the way to deal with that, through submissions, through evidence, through hearing from people that have considered the legislation. And I do appreciate what the Attorney-General's Department has said in relation to this, which seems to be the views of the Federal Police as well. So I've circulated amendments to address those concerns. Now, my understanding, and I'm sure I'll be picked up by the Deputy Clerk if I'm wrong in relation to this, is my understanding is that the the committee report for this bill has been tabled. And through you, Madam Acting Deputy President, I understand it has been, because I want to be subject to a Privileges Committee inquiry.
Senator Xenophon, it has been tabled.
It has been tabled?
You are safe.
I am safe. I'm glad I'm safe on something. So that's a good thing, Madam Acting Deputy President. Well, I can then freely discuss that report. For the life of me, I cannot understand why the committee, made up of government and opposition members, still do not believe, even with the amendments that have been proposed to deal with the concerns of the Attorney-General's Department, do not support this bill. For goodness sakes, if you're a parent and some creep is an adult is communicating with your child under the age of 16, lying about their age, and then want to meet your child, don't you think the law should intervene? It seems to me something that is a matter of common sense, of common decency, that ought to be the case. But instead there seems to be a lack of political will to deal with an issue as important as this, an issue that we must address because of the growing risk of online predators and the risk that it poses to our children. So I am absolutely gobsmacked why the committee, in its consideration of this bill with the amendments, did not think it appropriate to support this bill, did not acknowledge the problem that arises here. I think it's worth mentioning what Sonia Ryan said in her submission to this inquiry, and I quote directly: "Young teens often have a desire to be free of their parents' authority to gain acceptance as grown-ups. Teens are naive and inexperienced, especially in dealing with adults with ulterior motives. Sexual predators take advantage of this naivety. They manipulate kids in an effort to gain trust, which they use and gradually turn innocent online relationships into real-life sexual interactions. A predator usually approaches a child initially through harmless chat room or instant message dialogue. Over time, perhaps weeks or even months, the stranger, having obtained as much personal information as possible, grooms the child, gaining his or her trust through compliments, positive statements and other forms of flattery to build an emotional bond." Sonia Ryan continues, "We are seeking to add this vital law to address the common denominator in the way online predators behave. They all set up false online profiles. Most reduce their online age to present as a peer to the child with the intention to meet that child. I put it to you that no adult could have a legitimate reason for establishing false profiles with fake names, age and photos to contact and meet a child that is not known to them for legitimate purposes. The proposed law is specifically tailored to that fact." And Sonia goes on to say, "As a nation, we need to support our law enforcement units that are dealing with this new form of stranger danger to ensure that once they have identified a predator, they have the support of Parliament to apprehend these criminals. This proposed law," Sonia says, "is the gap between our law enforcement agencies and the ability to make a difference before it's too late. We have comprehensive laws that protect us from those who seek to commit an act of terror, apprehending the persons involved prior to the event. I believe we also need to have laws that protect our children on the same basis, to prevent an act of terror that may or may not end up in death, but may cause a lifetime of trauma." In essence, what Sonia is saying, and I agree, is that we need preventative measures. We need to have the legal option, a place where we can intervene before things go too far and more children are put at risk. I also want to raise some of the examples stated in the committee submission made by the Attorney-General's Department. The Department stated that the bill could not be supported despite acknowledging that, and I quote, "It is possible that by requiring an intention to encourage a physical meeting only, this offence may be easier to investigate and prosecute than existing grooming and procuring offences which require evidence of sexual intent, allowing law enforcement agencies to intervene during the preparatory stage of an offence before proof of sexual or other illicit intention is apparent." Madam Acting Deputy President, despite this comment, the Department declined to give its support to the bill. The Department also gave examples of genuine situations where people lie about their age online and extrapolated how this might lead to an innocent person being caught under the offences in this bill. But they don't get it. The fact is, this has another element that the 2010 bill did not have, and I acknowledge that. It's the element of, in addition to lying about your age to a child, it's wanting to meet them. trying to set up a meeting with that child. And it beggars belief that the Attorney General's Department has taken such a narrow, legalistic view in relation to this. One particular example used by the department was of an adult using Facebook to distribute invitations to a birthday party where the adult has humorously exaggerated their age. My proposed amendments removing the absolute liability in the bill will address these concerns. The department also used the example of a 19-year-old who could get caught under the provisions in the bill if they represented their age as 18 in order to enter into a relationship with someone who is 17, even though it is legal for them to have consensual intercourse. Firstly, I would hope that a 19-year-old would not think it was okay to lie about their age to a 17-year-old for the purpose of entering a relationship. Secondly, this demonstrates to me that the department does not understand or appreciate the real circumstances that these lies, in whatever situation, indicate intent to deceive another person. The internet and online technology are constantly evolving and expanding. They are also now embedded in our lives and in the lives of our children. In her submission to the inquiry, Ms Susan McLean, a cyber safety expert and educator, a former police officer, summarised research that revealed the extent of this use and highlighted disturbing trends. And she said in her submission, a 2005 survey of 742 teens aged 13 to 18 and 726 tweens aged 8 to 12 conducted by the Polly Klaas Foundation in the USA reported 54% of teens admitted communicated with someone they've never met before using an instant messaging program, 50% via email and 45% in a chat room. 16% of all respondents discovered that someone they were communicating with online was an adult pretending to be much younger. Madam Acting Deputy President, the pace of technological growth means children are almost always much more comfortable with online communication than their parents. What we still see as new and different is essential and as normal to them as breathing. New forms of communication mean that we need new laws to protect our children. In cyberspace, we can't stand by their side as they explore the world. We can't always set rules and curfews because our kids can be sitting safe in their rooms even while they're in danger. This bill is an attempt to address some of the techniques used by online predators so that we can put an additional safeguard in place for our children. If there is not support for this bill, I ask everyone in this place, what do we do if not this? What do we do? What are our options? How can we make things safer? We know that the current laws are not enough, and I believe this law, with its amendments, is a genuine attempt to fix it. Like technology, our response to these unimaginable crimes must keep evolving. We cannot ever say we have a final remedy to a problem because we do not know what the next problems will be. But I plead with my colleagues in this chamber and to the general community, this law either must be passed or something very close to it. It is completely unacceptable that an adult can lie about their age to a child online with the intent of meeting that child and for that not to be a criminal offence. I know it's not supported by my colleagues from the government or the opposition, as I understand it, but can I tell you there's a wonderful thing coming up soon, I don't know when, called an election. And along with Sonia Ryan, I will campaign for this to be an election issue. For all the parents out there, for all the kids out there who've been subject to online predators, this issue won't go away. And we must, with some decent political will, and I hope with bipartisanship, address this issue once and for all. There is no excuse to allow this type of behaviour for it not to be sanctioned by the law, and that is why I will continue to campaign for change in memory of Carly Ryan, in memory of her who was 15 and in love. And I asked all of you, what do we do next? We must do something to protect Carly, in the memory of Carly. For all those kids out there who are being targeted by online predators, the law must change, and it must change sooner rather than later. And again, I say to Sonia Ryan, it has been an enormous privilege to be able to work with you on this, and I will not give up until the law is changed.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Furner.